What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Wildcat Cave. Kentucky football starts the season off with a win in one of the strangest games I've ever seen. Nonetheless, the Cats get the 31 shutout victory and look ahead towards the most pivotal game of the season and the first SEC test for Mark Stoops and the Cats. This game could largely determine the rest of their season, and South Carolina has gotten the better of Kentucky recently. Today, we'll recap an odd opening weekend and preview this week's matchup against the Gamecocks. As always, guys, go subscribe to the channel if you aren't already so you don't miss out on anything Kentucky. Also, give the video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it so far, and leave a comment down below with your thoughts on either last week's craziness or your prediction for week 2. I'll give a shout out to the closest score in the next video. Also, follow me on X at Wildcat Cave BBN. Okay, let's quickly remind ourselves of what went down last Saturday. Kentucky played Southern Miss in a game that was supposed to start at 7:45. Officials kept the gates closed and didn't allow fans into the stadium, but never really announced why. And once they did allow fans in the game, it was delayed over an hour. And then the only thing they put out on social media was that the officials were meeting at 8:50 to try to come up with a resolution to what they're going to do. And then after largely hearing nothing, they made the same announcement except for 9:35. And that was the only thing put up in the stadium for the fans to know or see that were there at the game. Then at about 9:40-ish, they announced that kickoff is going to be at or around 10:05. And a lot of people stayed, but the problem is that no one in the stadium knew what was happening. People at home knew more than the people that were actually being affected by this circumstance. The people in the stadium had no cell service. Kentucky never announced over the PA system or on the boards any sort of updates or what was really going on. People kept seeing the equipment managers run out on the field and they would cheer, and then the equipment managers would leave and nobody knew what was going on. It was also really weird that they allowed 62,000 people to be on metal bleachers, but nobody was allowed on the field or before the game even allowed in the stadium, so that didn't really make sense. Overall, it was just really awful communication between the school and the fans, and not just the fans, but the fans that were affected the most at the game. The people at home on TV were getting updates from Tom Hart, and if you were outside the stadium and you had cell service, you could see what was being posted online. But in the stadium, the people affected the most were the ones that had the least amount of information, and I think that is where UK messed up the most. And they also did announce once they decided to play the game that there was going to be a 10-minute halftime. And then, of course, the game starts. You get into the third quarter. Lightning hits again. It gets delayed. And then eventually the game is called final in the third. Now, as far as the actual game goes, I'm overall pretty positive about everything. But here are my main takeaways. Number one is that Brock Vandagriff looked pretty good. He was 12 for 18, 169 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Overall, I thought he made fairly good decisions. He did have the 1 interception, which was a pretty bad throw, and then he had another one that probably should have been a pick 6, but it wasn't, and we don't play the game on almost and maybes. So for the stat line through 3 quarters, 12 of 18, that's like, what, 66%? 170 yards and 3 touchdowns, that's not too bad of a debut, even if it is against Southern Miss. He also made some pretty big plays with his legs, and I don't mean just running the ball, which he did really well. We talked about it. He's a lower-the-shoulder, run-you-over type of quarterback. I think Stoops and company kind of told him to chill with that a little bit after the opening couple possessions. But it's good to see that he can do, and like I said, I don't just mean by running the ball. He was able to maneuver outside the pocket and still deliver good passes. So that's all really promising. And what kind of impressed me the most about Brock was his poise in the pocket. There was multiple times when he would stand in the pocket, deliver a dart, and then get just killed, blown up. But having that poise, being able to maneuver a tight pocket, and being willing to stand in there and deliver good balls, even though you know you're going to get hit, is something you don't see out of every quarterback. Devin Leary really didn't do that very well last year. Will Levis did prior to him. So it's a thing, it's not the most important thing, but it is really good to have. So when you see him stand in there, maybe shift left or shift right just a little bit, deliver a good ball and under pressure, that's usually a pretty good sign you got a good quarterback. Also, another takeaway is that the wide receivers look pretty improved. Barryon obviously had 2 touchdowns, 1 receiving, 1 rushing. And Dane had a few big catches. Macklin looked really good. So overall, anything's better than how they started last year with the drops and kind of some of the problems they had. The tight ends got involved, so that's good. But overall, just the receiving room looked to improve a little bit. And I think they've done that. So that's all good news there. A great quarterback doesn't do you a whole lot of good if you don't have really good receivers. Another takeaway for me is that the defense seems to be the real deal. They have a lot of talent, and they have talent on all 3 levels of the defense. And not only is the talent that they return has improved quite a bit. And I think you might have at least 1 pro on each level. Up front on the D-line, you obviously have Deion Walker, projected to be a top 10 pick. He looked really good, didn't have a big stat line, but when he's getting double and triple team, that makes guys like Trayvon Ripka, Keyshawn Silver, Ox, all of those guys look really good because they can't be blocked like they typically would be if Deion's not there. In the linebacking core, you have Jamin Dumas-Johnson, the transfer from Georgia, the All-American transfer. He could easily be a pro out of this defense. He looked really good, had a big interception. And then finally in the secondary, everybody talks about Maxwell Hairston, and he's going to be a first-round pick, and that's great to have. But our other guys look good. Alex Safari looked good. J.Q. Hardaway had a interception in the end zone. So all 3 levels of the defense looked really good. Like I said, they had 2 interceptions, pitched a shutout, even though there was some third down stuff we'll talk about here in a second. Overall, you can't be upset when you pitch a shutout, especially a 31-0 shutout through 3 quarters. So overall, I don't have any major complaints. Another takeaway is the lights are cool. The new LED lights that they put in, I didn't stay through the game. It was getting late, had to work the next day, so we ended up leaving pretty early. But in the intermission while they were waiting to see what the weather was going to do, they debuted the lights, so I got to see that. That was really cool. I wish they would have them next week, but it's going to be a day game, so probably not. But they were cool to see. I think it'll be really cool to see against Georgia in 2 weeks when it's nighttime again. You have a big game atmosphere. I think that'll be really cool. Now, a few of the concerns, and I really am nitpicking with these concerns because, again, how upset can you be at a 31-0 through 3-quarter win? But number 1 is Brock's injury risk. Like I said, he likes to lower his shoulder, try to run dudes over. I think he'll calm that down as the season goes on, but we can't have him just trying to run over 250-pound linebackers every week. He's going to get hurt. We have good depth at quarterback, but we want our starter in there, obviously. So I'm going to need Brock to slide a little more. My second concern is our O-line allowed, again, a lot of pressure. They had the right tackle, I can't remember his name, but he had some issues. They allowed a lot of pressure to get back. And listen, that's a good defensive line for a mid-major like Southern Miss. That's probably like a low-middle SEC defensive line. So it's not like they're just bums that were getting pressure, but they're obviously not Georgia or Alabama or Texas or Ole Miss. So that is a little concerning that they were able to get a push on our offensive line. That's something that's got to get tightened up. We saw how bad it can be when our offensive line isn't very good last year, and that needs to be one of the position groups that is most improved. Also, our defense did allow some big third downs in the first couple drives. Now, of course, they still ended those drives without points, 2 of them on interceptions, which is good. But they got to be able to get off the field more consistently. I don't like seeing them constantly convert 3rd and long. That's something that can and will bite us against South Carolina if we allow that to happen. And then overall, I just want more sacks. We had 2, which isn't terrible, but I've talked about this before in previous videos. The SEC averages around 32 sacks a season, and Kentucky's consistently around 25. So they're well under the SEC average in sacks when you have such a strong D-line with Deion Walker, Keyshawn Silver, Ox, and all the other guys up there, Trayvon Ripka. I want to see us get after the quarterbacks a little more. We have a problem in our defense, and it's a Brad White thing, I think, and we talked about it a lot on the live stream, that he doesn't bring a lot of pressure. He's a bend but don't break. We have enough talent on this defense. I want to see us get after some quarterbacks. Now, looking ahead to South Carolina. I hate South Carolina. Outside of Tennessee and Louisville, they are easily my least favorite SEC fan base. They're loud, they're cocky, no pun intended. They're always picked ahead of Kentucky in every ranking, even though Kentucky's dominated them for the better part of a decade. It's just frustrating. Beamer's a dork. So I hate South Carolina. I want to stomp them. They're just the worst fan base outside of the two I already named. Probably second worst in the SEC in my opinion. So I hope we just go out there and destroy them. But about their team, they narrowly beat Old Dominion 23-19.
23-19! We have a 23-19! Red alert!
This past Saturday, in a game that they almost lost and struggled heavily, which you like to see. I'm glad they won because you never want a team to come off a loss and then come play us. So it's good that they won, but it was also good to see that they struggled and maybe they're not as good as they think they are. So they're going to be coming in here looking to make a statement against Kentucky, and Kentucky can't let that happen. When you go out and you play Southern Miss and you beat them 31-0 under the weirdest of circumstances, and then you have South Carolina coming in who can barely take care of Old Dominion at home, that's a type of team you have to go out and separate yourself from in the SEC. Lenora Sellers is their quarterback. He completed 43% of his passes, 114 yards, 68 rushing yards, and got sacked 4 times. That's a pretty pitiful stat line. If you're letting Old Dominion sack you 4 times, I just said all that stuff about us needing to get pressure on quarterbacks. This is the perfect opportunity to do that. He completed less than half of his passes for just barely 100 yards. Where he's going to be tricky for Kentucky is we've seen running quarterbacks tear up Brad White before. So really containing him, making him rely on his arm is going to be huge. If we can make him throw the ball and not let him get outside the pocket and try to make plays, I think we're going to be in pretty good shape because like I said, he completed less than half of his passes against a pretty bad team. Their running back Sanders, I believe, is the same guy that they had last year, and he's pretty good. So I got a feeling they're going to rely on him quite a bit. If he's not, he should be the focal point of their offense. They obviously don't have their receiver last year, Leggett. So he's gone, so their passing attack's definitely taken a step back. But their running back is just as good, if not gotten a little better since last year. So really containing the run, I think, is going to be the key this week. And if we can do that, then I feel really good. Like I said, Sellers is a pretty bad quarterback, so if we can just get pressure on him and force him to try to make a play, we're going to be in an okay spot. Now, overall, from just a talent and matchup standpoint, Kentucky should be able to beat the hell out of South Carolina. The biggest question mark for me is if Kentucky's offensive line is going to be able to get a push up front and keep Brock clean. If they can do that, I don't see another matchup on the field that would really favor Carolina. It's also kind of the worst kept secret in the SEC that Stoops and Beamer don't really like each other. And they both view each other as a game that they need to win to kind of validate their seasons and accomplishment as coaches each year. So there's no doubt that both sides will be fired up. Kentucky needs to win this to kickstart the type of season they want, and Carolina needs it to prove that they're better than they showed last week. After owning South Carolina for about 7 years, Kentucky's let the past 2 meetings get away from them, granted under some less than perfect circumstances, but nonetheless, Stoops needs this one more than ever. For a 3:30 kickoff in the weird events of last Saturday, I'm sure Kroger Field will be rocking. Fans know what this game means for the season, and I believe they'll show out in full force. I wish this was a night kickoff so we could get a full day of tailgating in, have the new lights at night again, but this is a primetime TV slot, and a lot of eyes will be on Kentucky this week. The line opened at Kentucky as a 7-point favorite, but it's been bet up to 10, which is a huge swing in favor for the Cats. Kentucky rarely is double-digit favorites against SEC teams other than like Vandy, but if they can cover the spread this week, it might make a statement that Kentucky's here to be a contender in the SEC. As for me and my prediction, I think Kentucky's offense will be powerful enough to score while our defense should be able to shut them down fairly easily. If we can get off the field on 3rd down, then I think Kentucky has a chance to really put it on South Carolina this week. I genuinely don't think that they're very good, and even though I'm not totally convinced that Kentucky's great yet, I don't think this game will be super close. My opinion is going to be Kentucky 34, South Carolina 17. Thank you all so much for watching. If you've made it this far in the video, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments your predictions for the game as well. I'll see you all next week. Go Cats.